I cannot wait to introduce you today to Jon McLernon, owner, creator of Freedom Nutrition Coaching, Lose Weight, Love Life, Never Diet Again. Hi, Jon.
Hey, how we doing?
Oh, I'm good. It's Friday. How's your Friday starting?
I've already done one webinar and I've also done some breathing exercises and did a ride on my recumbent bike. So I'm feeling like really fresh and energized.
Wow. What time is it where you live?
Quarter after 10. So I think I'm an hour behind you.
Okay. Okay. You've been really productive. Good work.
Well, I have this kind of rule of thumb that like I invest in myself first every morning before I really dive into work.
Mhm.
And that really, we'll get into that like when we get into the story, but that really has been born of like formerly having a very disordered relationship with myself and my body. And so I really make it a priority to invest in the most important things first when I start my day.
And I think it's so important you're living what you're probably telling your clients. So let's use this as a perfect segue into I think we need to know a little bit more about your past.
Yeah, so I've had like a super varied background. I was a nanotechnology researcher, so that involved in chemistry when I was at university. I spent 6 years as a marine engineer in the Navy. I spent 3 years as a globetrotting English teacher. I've also been a four-time entrepreneur. I have two failed businesses and two successful ones. So
Wow.
it's been quite the roller coaster ride. And so I'd say it was about 10 years ago when we were traveling around the world. My wife and I, we did this. We didn't set out planning for a 3-year trip, but this is kind of how it unfolded. And we ended up down in South Africa, and that's where I went through a traumatic experience down there. And as a result of that, I became a binge eating food addict. And so I went from being pretty athletic and reasonably active to being morbidly obese over a span of about 6 months. And prior to that experience, I would say I would have thought anyone who was overweight was just like lazy or undisciplined. But
Mhm.
after going through something like that, and I was turning to food as a coping mechanism because I felt drugs and alcohol would be a really bad path to go down. you know, uh, I I was now all of a sudden trying to wade into this world of like weight loss and diet culture and things I'd never experienced before. And weight gain comes with a lot of emotional pain connected to it, as well as physical discomfort, just genuine. Everything's hard. And so I tried a lot of, I don't want to say stupid things because, a lot of things that were never destined to work. I spent a lot of time and energy looking for answers in all the wrong places. And that led me to about 6 years of struggling with yo-yo dieting up and down. Now, I share that because people will hear that I've lost over 100 pounds and kept it off. I'm like, the truth is, I probably lost more like 600 pounds, but with the up and down of like weight regain,
Yeah.
it was a lot. So it was when I hired a coach about 4 years ago, back in 2017, and he really shone a light on this glaring problem that was staring back at me, and that was my relationship to myself and to my body. So because of all of my failed attempts to lose weight, I'd really become quite angry and spiteful towards my body. It was as though I felt it had betrayed me,
Mhm.
because it had robbed me of this athleticism. It had robbed me of a number of years in my 30s. It's not that I had a bad life, but it had robbed me of a lot of things I used to do. And it was like I had repeatedly tried to punish it into submission and my body refused to comply. And so this coach, he worked with me to heal my relationship with myself, and kind of by extension that changed my relationship with food in a very
Wow.
powerful way. And as that shift happened, this recognition that I could treat myself with compassion and actually lose the weight, and not only that, keep it off and move into this incredibly healthy space where I'm at now, mentally and emotionally.
So interesting. And just to rewind for a second, was any
Mhm.
part of the traumatic experience, did you have injury to your body at any point?
Yeah, well, I was concussed, so it was, and I'll just say, for anybody listening, like I'll share a few of the details, and it might sound like I talk about it lightly, and I will say I've done the work, which allows me to speak about my traumatic experience, and I think it's really important to understand that because there's some people who've been through trauma who can't yet really discuss openly what they experienced, and that's okay.
Sure. Sure.
Um, I was attacked by four men, and their goal was to beat me to death. They'd murdered a man the night before, and this was living in South Africa. So it wasn't really about me necessarily, but it was about I was a white individual in South Africa. They didn't know anything about my history, and so I would say that I was a representation of something they had felt had historically oppressed them, and this was the course of action they were taking. And so, yeah, I ended up like badly concussed, and I didn't break any bones. And they had knives, but they didn't actually stab me, which I managed to get away before that happened. well, I say get away. There was a whole experience. We were trapped in a building. We were kind of held hostage for a while. And it was just, it was a really messy experience. Um, so the fallout from that was we continued living in South Africa, and there was many more incidents that happened, none quite as violent as the one that happened to me and put me in the hospital. But it was like you layer trauma upon trauma upon trauma. And it got us to the point where I think I was probably on the verge of a nervous breakdown. I had a lot of violent and angry thoughts in my head, which is not who I am by nature. They're called intrusive thoughts, and they were actually starting to have some appeal. And that was when I knew I had to get out of this situation, because something's going really wrong here when I'm actually thinking, I want you to break in so I can attack you. My brain was trying to take something back that had been taken from me. And that happens in the experience of trauma, where something is taken from somebody. And very often we say hurt people hurt people. So those who have been victims of violence or abuse, it's not uncommon for them to become violent abusers, but the behavior makes sense because they're trying to take back something that was taken from them.
Sure.
And so, yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you for going into that. I just, again, for our listeners who can sit here and empathize and see hope in your journey and where you've come. I think for the person going, yeah, but I'm physically unable to do something. It's helpful to kind of understand where some of your baselines were, what you were starting from. And I think another big question for listeners will be, you mentioned this coach really helping to shift and help you look into more of your past. Like, where was the aha moment for you, the light switch that was like, this is the area I need to work on? How did that coach help you get to that point?
Well, he asked one question. I say this question changed my life. So he said to me, and we'd been working together for a couple of months. So there's real power in coaching and very well-timed questions. And I think that's, I'm a coach, obviously, and I love it, but I think that's really key. And he said, Jonathan, if you make a list of all the things that you love and value, how far down that list do I go before I see your name?
And just how far was it?
I wasn't on the list.
Wow.
Yeah. So that, for me, like, I was really stunned when he asked that question, because he was presenting something that was really outside of my sense of identity, my understanding of reality, my sense of what masculinity looks like, and so on. It sounds strange now that I look back in the relationship I have with myself and my body now, but we can't really conceive of things that, never really thought about before. I didn't know that I was allowed to be on a list of things I love and value. And maybe I thought that would have actually been like arrogant, or I would have had some sort of misplaced humility, or, so it was to now have to figure out, well, what does that look like?
Yeah.
What does it look like to actually love myself? It feels weird and it feels awkward. And where do you even start? And especially in masculine culture, and believe me, I'm very much an advocate for positive masculinity. I love being male. I love masculine energy, but we certainly have our problems. I'll say that. But this idea, he modeled for me what compassion looked like, because I didn't know how to show myself compassion. And I think it came from this misunderstanding of what compassion actually is. Mm-hmm. And so in a nutshell, I would say compassion is not a get out of jail free card, but compassion really walks the middle road. So from the one hand, it comes like judgment and shaming to try and coerce someone into change behavior, like, you should know better, why are you doing this? That doesn't really help, because that causes a defensive retreat. On the other hand, if they go, hey, you know what, you've already had a hard day, you might as well polish off whatever it was you were started into, that's called enabling. It doesn't really move somebody forward either. So compassion walks the middle road and says, hey, let's figure out what's going on here. And we're going to do it without judgment.
You are so well-spoken. I could sit here and listen to you all day.
Well, thank you.
Such a fun surprise on this Friday. So it's interesting, because where you go with masculinity, there's the female part of this comes more from just too much time on others, and that feeling of needing, like, that you're selfish if you take time on yourself. Like, you can see where both genders go down their own path of why there's not permission to fill your own cup, and we can't pour from that empty cup. And so I know this is resonating with so many people. So again, perfect segues back to, if you are filling your own cup first, what does that look like again for you as well as your clients?
Yeah, and I'll explain to people the first thing that started sort of my journey of self love was brushing my teeth.
Hmm.
And why I want to highlight that is because maybe we have this idea that it needs to be this grandiose thing, but what
Yeah.
this involved for me was really changing my sense of identity and my sense of self worth. And it's like, well, how do we do this? Affirmations have value. I don't want to speak down about them. However, if they're not grounded in reality and matched by actions, we
Yeah.
know at the core of our being that they're not true. And so the act of brushing my teeth was a simple investment in myself, a simple act of self care. And every time that behavior was repeated, I was signaling to myself, I am worthy of self care.
Mm.
So from that point, I was able to build. So then it became drink 500 mils of water, or I guess it'd be 16 ounces of water to start my day, to hydrate. And these little steps, just piece by piece, baby steps. And it was enough that, because if we try to introduce too much change, we'll actually trigger what I call the emotional brick wall. Our brain goes, this is too much of a departure from who I am.
Mhm.
And so we must go back to where we were before. And that will show up in the form of self-sabotaging behaviors very commonly.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I love that you said brushing your teeth. That wasn't where I thought you were going to go.
Yeah.
But I will say, I was just talking to somebody else who said the dentist like industry has it right as far as even if we go this way with self-care as well as no one questions doing that. Like that is a
Yeah.
habit that's built in that people just go, yes, we sign up for it. We say yes.
Yeah.
And to think, how do we shift that over into nutrition habits or fitness
Yeah.
habits where it just feels that innate, like of course I brush my teeth, of course I go for a walk in the day. And I think our industry of fitness and health
Yeah.
has our work cut out for us a little bit.
Absolutely. So I speak a lot about what I call CMGs, or can't miss goals. In fact, I was just on another broadcast this morning talking about New Year's resolutions and the struggles that we encounter with them. And so the idea behind a can't miss goal is it's because what determines the success of a habit? Because if we're going to build a lifestyle, it's going to be built on the back of like our habits and kind of our systems. And that's not to remove the emotion of the human experience from it, but that's kind of how our brain works. So if we want to establish a habit, a behavior that we do without really thinking too much about it, we have to have it has to be a repeatable behavior. And so if we think about the more times we repeat a behavior, the more likely it becomes a habit. So if you tried to set this activity goal, like maybe you've been sedentary and you go, I'm going to hit the gym, 5 days a week for an hour. That's a huge leap from sitting on the couch. And you're very likely to fail at that. And the repeatability of that behavior is quite low. On the
Right.
other hand, if you say, I'm going to go for a 5-minute walk every day, and if after 5 minutes I feel like going for more, I will. If not, I'm done. I can tick it off. Because what you're doing is you're building a pattern of behavior. You're wiring that into your brain. And by doing it this way, you're actually turning that behavior into something that doesn't require conscious effort every day.
Right. Which goes along with the talk of neuroplasticity, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that the more that we do something, that we carve that path out and make it easier and easier and diminish the other paths that we're trying to. They don't disappear, but we're
No.
just making it easier. Because I'm sure for you too, like there, yes, you are healed in a sense, but do
Mm-hmm.
you have your days where you go, okay, slippery slope could happen here? Like
Yeah,
I need
100%.
what does that look like for you when you get those feelings?
I'm able to view them with compassion now, and I speak a lot about compassion because my two core values are compassion and integrity, and everything else kind of flows from there. So
Mm.
living in accordance with my values is integrity, and then compassion is giving myself the space to be human and struggle. I think those are really, really important because people see the before and the after, and they just
Mhm.
assume that the after is happily ever after. And I go,
Mhm.
well, I'm in a much, much better place, and I certainly wouldn't go back to where I was, but it doesn't mean I'm free from struggle. And I think once we understand that, we're less disappointed by the reality that once you, let's say, hit a weight goal, for example, if that's what you want to work towards, like life continues. You still got to do the laundry, wash the dishes, that kind of stuff, right? Life continues. So for me, I would say like a recovered binge eating food addict. That was part of my trauma, but it doesn't mean those urges don't show up in my head.
Mhm.
They're uninvited, but they show up. So you think, well, how do I navigate that? Well, the first thing is I don't judge myself for these impulses showing up in my head. I don't say like, oh, you idiot, you're past that. Why, and so on. So there's no judgment around that. It's kind of more like a curiosity, like, and actually, and just say, you don't belong here. Like, that was a part of old me. And so I just kind of, I through meditation, I've actually learned how to, I have this visualization where I wrap a thought in a bubble, and I float it out the side of my head.
Mm.
So it's this idea that I don't have to act on that urge. The other thing I tap into is what I call my emotionally compelling reason. Simon Sinek might call it your why, but I like to go a little deeper and say this is an emotionally compelling reason, because human beings are very much emotional creatures with a logical component to our brain. I have an 8-month-old son, and I love him dearly. He's the cutest boy in the world, of course. um, his legs never stop moving. Like, he was doing like 120 kicks a minute in the womb. Like, we would joke that he was riding a bike in there, and that was kind of a preview of what's to come.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden I realized, like, this kid, I'm an older dad. I started at 39. I'm gonna be 40. This kid's gonna be 1. I'm gonna be 50. This kid's gonna be 10. And I already see how much energy this kid has and how much he moves. And if I want to be present in his life, I have to start now. So naturally I'm quite strong, and so I like lifting weights. It's easy to go to what we're strong. But now I'm working on my conditioning, because I realize I have to be able to sprint after this kid if he heads for a road. I don't want to be responsible for some sort of unfortunate mishap that could have been prevented. But it's more important to me than that. It's that I say I don't want to be a sideline dad. I don't want to have to sit on the couch and watch my kid play and be like, I'm sorry, I can't be on the floor with you. I want to be able to get up and down and play with him and be physically present in his life and really model healthy masculine behavior for him.
Do you walk all of your clients through a scenario like this to help them get very clear on their why or their emotional component with that?
I do. So when we start out, like, I send my clients an intake form, which is pretty common, but I ask a few key questions in there, because I say that weight loss is a doorway. It's not a destination. So I still believe there's value in talking about weight loss. I understand why the pendulum swung really far, because there's a lot of like shaming and guilt and things like that. Our sense of self-worth shouldn't necessarily be connected to our physical appearance entirely. That being said, there is a real impetus in terms of our health to achieve a healthy weight. We know that, cardiovascular health, diabetes, and so on, they're very real things. So, but nobody's motivated by, or very few, I should say, are motivated by like, well, I don't really want to get heart disease. That doesn't really light a fire inside of us. Even a number on the scale, what we're actually thinking about is how I will feel and what I will be able to do that I can't do right now. So we're actually thinking about the lifestyle we want to lead. And so we really want to dig into that and get them to visualize, what does this look like for you? What's this number actually about? And by going through that, so now we have something to connect to, because the process of losing weight is uncomfortable. I wish it was fast and easy in one sense, but you know what? Actually, I take that back. I like the fact that it's uncomfortable, because it's where we grow and transform and become better versions of ourselves. And I think there's a quote out there, I don't know who to attribute it to, but it's like, when we accept it's going to be hard, it gets easier.
Right. Shifting of expectations, right?
Yeah. I often feel like one of my titles should be manager of expectations.
Yeah. I hear it's the least utilized measure or tool that we should be using. And if we would actually shift more expectations, we'd get a lot further. So somebody gets an intake form, you start with it this way, and then next steps would look like what?
Well, what we're going to do is we know the fundamental principles of a healthy lifestyle. Our biology really hasn't changed very significantly from, thousands of years ago. So we know the fundamental principles are going to involve a regular pattern of activity. It's going to involve eating mostly nutrient-dense foods, a good amount of vegetables, lean protein, quality carbohydrates, and so on. Probably some proactive stress management, because we live in a pretty stressful world. Quality sleep, rest, and recovery, and maybe something like hydration, right? So those principles don't really change. We in the health and fitness and nutrition industry, we dress it up differently to try to appeal to people's sense of novelty or desire for novelty. But the truth is, they're fundamentally not going to change very much. Now, I don't hand people rules and say, you have to follow these rules because you're in my program now. That's very disempowering and actually really dishonors the individual. It just dishonors their autonomy. So rather I say, we're going to start with a principle. This is our starting point, and you're going to try to implement this, and then you're going to report back to me how it works and where it doesn't, what it triggers, and you are actually going to actively shape this principle in a way that works for you. And by doing this, now that you have an active hand in shaping your lifestyle, when I step away from our time working together, you don't just collapse because, me and my sort of rules have disappeared from your life. And so I really want to, because my goal is not just to help people lose weight. We could tie you to a tree and starve you and you'll lose weight. But as soon as we untie you, you're going back to, your old patterns of behavior.
It's
And
so
so
good. Yeah.
I really want to empower the individual to create that. So they're actually the ones that create the transformation. You know, I don't want to put up my hand and be like, I'm the one that created that transformation, this individual. So I say to my clients, think of me like your tour guide, not your Sherpa.
Perfect. It is. It's always the person that's creating theirs. And I think it's empowering to tell someone that too, that this
Yeah.
is you, your successes, because you're working, you're making it happen.
Yeah.
No,
Well,
that's,
if the goal is permanent weight loss, you kind of have to become permanently transformed. I say
yeah.
kind of. No, you actually have to become permanently transformed. And
Yes.
that can be like a daunting thing to face. So I'll give you an
Mhm.
example. When I was at my peak of about 330 pounds, I, I, in my heart, I felt like I wasn't going to be able to lose this weight. So I adopted this identity of the jolly fat guy. Show up at parties, huge appetite, loved everyone's food, always took the extra food or whatever, always encouraged people to eat and so on. So I was really acting in congruence with this sense of identity. Now, my attempts to lose weight that failed, they didn't really involve me working to change this sense of identity or adopting a new sense of identity. And so inherently, I would end up sabotaging because there was some value in me being the jolly fat guy. People liked being around me because I encouraged them to indulge in hedonistic behaviors. So it sounds maybe a bit dramatic, but it's like there actually need to be a bit of a process of grief in terms of letting go of this person and saying this identity no longer serves me. But we have to remember that it's not 100% positive that I'm letting go of that identity. There were elements of it that I had to put behind that actually, there was a reason why I liked that identity. I didn't like being obese, but I liked being the life of a party who
Yeah.
encouraged everybody to eat. So,
Yeah. Man, changing of identity. And then this is a whole nother episode, but how our closest people around us also play into the
yeah.
hardship of that, because we could be okay with our identity changing and it can be really hard for a loved one. Have you and your
Yeah.
wife had any, I'm just going all personal, aren't
Yeah,
I,
yeah,
any
totally.
issues along
Uh,
this process?
I will say that I'm very lucky. My wife and I have been together for about 17 years. And so she met me when I was just getting ready for boot camp, and I was pretty jacked and in good shape. She's been with me when I was obese and 330 pounds, and she never wavered. And so that's not to say there wasn't bumps in the road. There was definitely some times where we went through friction, but at the heart of like our relationship was this agreement that we are in this together for life. We made that commitment, and because of that, we're going to work through these things. When we butt heads, we're going to work through it and come out the other side, because at the end of every sort of conflict, we have a decision to make here. Either we split up and, change our lives entirely, or we solve this because we're going to continue to coexist, and we figure out a way to make it work. And so it's not been easy, but it's been absolutely worth it. And so there's another sort of mental health piece that we didn't really dive into, but I grapple with depression and anxiety as well. So becoming open with her about my struggles was
Yeah.
really, really key. So I tried to hide them for a very long time because I felt that it would diminish me as a man in her eyes if she was aware that I had these struggles and weaknesses. When, of course, that was totally not the case. My wife loves me and wants to support me. She's like my biggest cheerleader. And so when I became open about my struggles, and then became open about my emotions, and it's like when you say that, like, it genuinely hurts. I'm an empath. Like, I wear my heart on my sleeve. And so my wife used to tease me and call me the Tin Man. But really what it was is I was burying my emotions so they couldn't be seen. It wasn't they weren't there. And so as I became comfortable becoming open about these things, like, there was obviously some friction, because all of a sudden I'm asking her to treat me differently. I'm asking her to be more thoughtful about the words she uses. I'm asking her not to, because she saw my behaviors, my binge eating, and she felt helpless. She's like, what do I do? Like, and she wasn't equipped, and it doesn't really fall on her in a sense to try to solve that. So there was this real period of growth that we had to go through to get to where we are.
Right. And it's work, right? It goes
Yeah.
back to, it's a bit of an exhaustive process, but it's worth it.
100% it is. And I think if we have a hope, like we're willing to be, that it goes back to that emotionally compelling reason. Um, you know, part of the reason that we probably had children later in life is because I wouldn't have been a very good father. I wasn't really in the emotional and mental state of mental health where I would have been a good father. And we wanted to be kind of responsible about that. And so now, I mean, I absolutely love being a dad, and I don't think I'd be in a healthier place mentally to raise this little boy. And so I think it was, that was one of the things but I always wanted to be a dad. It was, in me for a very long time. But recognizing that we needed to wait until we got to this place, and now it is absolutely, absolutely worth it.
Right. And you have a community where you're supporting all these people. What about you? I know that family's your support system. Do you still work
Yeah,
with a coach? Do you work like, what's
absolutely.
your, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really important because, again, this is not my quote, but it's like trying to fix yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth. It doesn't work because you're stuck in your own head. And so, I'm still a human being with emotions and feelings and struggles and good days and bad days and so on. And I think it's really important. When I started in this journey, just being like an online nutrition coach, I felt a lot of what's known as imposter syndrome because I don't look like a fitness model. Yes, I've lost a lot of weight. I have loose skin. I don't look like this flawless, shredded six pack. Mind you, I mean, I think it's a myth that we all want to look like that. I'm healthy. I can do a lot. I can do everything I want to do physically now. Anyways, so I really had to grapple with that for a period of time. But connecting with a coach is so incredibly valuable because they're able to give me, it's like kind of third party impartial insight. So when I'm struggling with the ticker tape in my own head, they're able to kind of just say, hey, let's get some clarity around this. I think the other part of it is it's easier to be vulnerable when we're connected to a safe person, if I could put it that way. Just even from a primal biological standpoint, when we feel safe and we don't feel exposed and isolated, we're much more likely to change and grow. And so I have many big things that I want to accomplish, and now I actually believe they're possible. And so now I want to connect myself to people that are further down the path that I want to travel, because that's one of the best ways to short circuit the learning curve.
Right. It does. It expedites it, doesn't it? I once you start to work with someone and see that process, it'd be really hard not to. So I love that you have your own coach too. You've got your program. Where can listeners going, man, I need a Jon in my life. Where can they find you?
So I publish live broadcasts regularly, actually. And I publish them as live so that people can actually interact if they want to, usually Mondays, Tuesdays, and Fridays. But so you can look up Freedom Nutrition Coaching, whether it's on Twitch, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, it's at NoFN Diets, No Effin' Diets. That's a bit of a play on Freedom Nutrition Coaching. As well as you can send me a friend request on Facebook. I haven't hit my friend limit yet, so as of the time of recording this anyways. And so, or of course, I do have a website, freedomnutritioncoach.com. And maybe I could just throw in one more free resource for your clients. If they find themselves struggling with emotional eating, nighttime eating, binge eating, that kind of thing, this isn't a medical resource, but this is just some tips and tools that I've used and my clients use to help them begin to repair their relationship with food. And so I call it Crush Your Cravings. So if you go to freedomnutritioncoach.com/crush your cravings, freedomnutritioncoach.com/book. Sorry, I made it simpler so people could remember it.
It's perfect. Everything will be in the show notes too. If we have people running around doing laundry or whatnot and can't look it up at the moment. I think your website's beautiful, by the way. I was on there and a thing pops up too where it just would be really easy to grab you and communicate. Yes. And we're in the season right now. I don't want to date the episode, but with holidays and with everything, that this is the time, people, like if you feel like you could really use some support getting through just harder seasons of your life, that is what a Jon is there for. And I
really just encourage people to reach out. I'm very down to earth, if I could say so. I'm really easy to talk to because I've been there. I think that's really a part of it. It's not that I'm the guru, you're the dummy. It's that, I'm very interested in you as the expert of your own life experience. And that if we work together, we're going to collaborate like that instead of, me telling you what to do. So it's a very empowering experience. And so clearly I love what I do, and I can't see myself doing anything else anymore.
That's when you know you've done it, right? You're like, I'm there.
Yep.
I want to keep growing in my same path, but I'm not seeking anymore on these outside edges.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love hearing that you're to that place. You've already given us so much wisdom and hope, but I'm going to ask you one final question here. And it's if you could wrap your arms around our listeners, or even just think of your 8-month-old son, like what
Mhm.
would be the one thing that you just hope and pray that people take away from your experience?
You're not broken and you're not hopeless.
Mm.
So the road back might be really difficult, but don't be afraid to ask for help. In fact, the best thing you could possibly do is ask for help. Human beings are wired to grow from connection to other human beings. It's the best thing we could do. And so I think it was a long road back, but it was so worth it. And so I would just encourage you to do the same thing. Connect to those people that can really help you move forward and feel no shame in asking for help.
Yeah, I love you're not broken and you're not hopeless. And I can still picture someone on the other end hearing it and being like, I get that for somebody else, but not for me. And you would
Mhm.
stand there in front of him and be like, no, I'm talking to you. You're
Yeah.
not broken. You're not hopeless.
Well, I would say to people, you can borrow my belief in you until you believe in yourself.
Mm, that's so good. You are wonderful. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for joining us.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for hosting me.
Mm.